Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo and Melina Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, today we are pleased to welcome Natalie Blyth to our podcast. Natalie is the Global Head of Sustainable Finance and Transition, Corporate and Institutional Banking at HSBC, and the Non-Executive Director at HSBC Latin America. Natalie joined HSBC back in 2007 in the UK investment banking, running the consumer sector, and then moved to the commercial bank when she was appointed the global head of large corporates, client coverage. In 2016, she became the group general manager, leading HSBC's global trade finance business. And the same, actually 3 years later in 2019, she also took on the role of non-executive director at HSBC Latin America. In 2022, she stepped into the role of a global head of commercial banking sustainability at HSBC. And more recently, she has been appointed the global head of sustainable finance and transition, corporate and institutional banking. And this is basically with the goal of leading the development, implementation, and execution of CIB's sustainability framework and strategy across 1.2 million clients. Natalie is very passionate about the future and building a better tomorrow, and leaning on her international commercial experience, she's very keen to apply her knowledge and leadership skills to help solving some of the world's toughest problems and drive the new low carbon economy. And I guess me and Natalie met in that context because we share the same passion. Natalie has a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry with Mathematics and Bioenergetics from the University of St Andrews in Scotland. Natalie, is truly a pleasure to have you in our podcast show. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful to be here, Paolo and Melina. Thank you very much.
So I guess I was struggling in reading your very long bio with all of these long job titles you have at the HSBC. But can you tell us a little bit more, Natalie, about your background and why at a certain point you started going in the direction of sustainability in your jobs at the HSBC?
Thanks, Paolo. I think if we go back to my childhood, actually, and I apologize for all those sort of convoluted titles, I think it's just the nature of being in quite a large, complex organization. We can try better. I think going back to my childhood, actually, nature always captivated me. I lived in the countryside, rubbing around in mud, trying to tickle fish in the local stream, all sorts. And I ended up at university really, actually, as a child, wanting to be a vet, but I ended up doing biochemistry at university. And in my thesis there, which was on bioenergetics, got really, you know how it is, an opportunity in a lifetime. You don't have responsibilities. You can just focus on something really complicated and deep. And I became really obsessed with the efficiency of mitochondria and their sort of energy transfer, and started to dream about, everybody else was trying to take big things and make them smaller. And I was dreaming about taking really small things like mitochondria and making them really big. And these dreams that I had on a recurrent basis were, what if we could just have giant mitochondria, every household have one, feed it whatever it needed, and it would be the most efficient energy provider. So I think the sustainability thread has been all the way through there. Hydrogen probably might be a bit more efficient. So that's what started. I then did law and ended up in banking. Don't ask those sort of questions on that. But there is a logic to it. And all of these threads are now really helping me in this sort of current role. But in banking, I could see there that really it was being a sort of a force for good. Initially, I think investment banking, it was really serving the client and serving the client holistically and all their employees. And then when I moved into trade finance, it became, and that's actually with some of those large clients in the consumer sector, starting to wrestle, so a couple of decades ago now, with palm oil and deforestation and so on. So trying to do the right thing all the way through. And then trade finance was much more about, wow, HSBC has this amazing business, and that serves a real role in society. And that came to life, obviously, with COVID. So, of course, we are responsible for making trade flow around the globe. And I was in charge of that business when Trump 1 was around. So we sort of had a little frolic with some of the sort of trade wars. But critically, obviously, COVID came along too. And there it was very apparent that the bank is a force for good for keeping those absolutely critical PPE and equipment moving. And at that stage, my eldest daughter was just starting her first sort of job as a sort of a doctor, qualified doctor in a hospital. So I was desperate to get her and everybody else in the sort of system the right equipment and to understand, you know, the role in society that sort of banks and trade play. So it's a huge one. And financial inclusion as well. There's a big trade finance gap. So if we can play our part there. I then got breast cancer, which caused me to sort of just take a step back and sort of think about what is my purpose, what is my raison d'etre in life, because you don't know how long you have and you need to make the most of it. So purpose has always been there, but the purpose has got sort of bigger and bigger and more to do with sort of humanity. Ukraine war came along. I took in a family of 5 and really sort of understood at close quarters what that sort of forced migration, the impact psychologically that can have on just a small unit. Imagine if we don't actually solve some of these really critical problems in sustainability, and there are billions of forced migration. That terrifies me, that second and third order impact. So it's all there. And I am really thrilled to have had this role for the last 3 years and now to be in this new role, which is bigger and better.
Fantastic. And at this point, I'm curious. Can you tell us and our audience what your new role is about? And I guess generically speaking, because we have a very wide audience following this podcast. What is the role of a sustainability leader in banking?
Great questions. Probably not easy to answer in sort of in a nutshell, but the role is really around our corporate clients. So I'm not so much focused on the sort of philanthropy and so on, but we have 1.2 million plus corporate clients. And my job is to make sure that we have a strategy that's a team that is the best in class, and you can really use sustainability as a talent magnet. Second to that is to really sort of revise the strategy and make sure we've got the right strategy there, to make sure that the bank obviously hits its commitments and targets, but more than that is actually sort of serving a purpose in terms of supporting all of those clients in their journey to be resilient and make it through this industrial revolution, because it's nothing less than that. So that they're viable clients in the future and that therefore we are a viable bank in the future. So it's a win-win as we go through this pivotal industry change. But of course, it's not very linear either. And so we have to be quite dexterous depending on the scenarios that we are facing.
Very interesting.
Fantastic. And Natalie, so you talked to us a little bit about the role of a sustainability leader in finance and your role. Can you tell us a little bit more broadly about the role of banks in relation to net zero transitions and what are the key opportunities for banks and their clients?
Sure, Melina. I think if you just sort of reflect for a moment on what a bank actually does, I think it's quite important, because a lot of people think, well, a bank is financing. Yeah. They look after my money, I borrow for them, etc. But it really is a bit more than that. There are 3 things that I think are absolutely the core of banking. So financing for sure. mitigating risk. So I said they look after our money. So that really is sort of keeping things sort of safe. But across corporates, that can be a whole range of different risks. So financing, mitigating risk, and facilitating. So beyond the immediate direct financing, there's a lot of facilitation work that goes on, whether it's in our markets business, whether it's in our trade finance business. You know, we can help bridge the trust gap between a buyer and a seller. Mm-hmm. You know, you've got a new buyer in a country, they want you to sort of ship the goods and you haven't been paid, and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, where does the sort of ownership cross over? Where's the trust? We can step in and we can say, yep, the goods are on the ship, they're the right goods, you can pay now, and we can tell the other party, the seller, yeah, this buyer is good for it, and we can sort of come up with propositions that absorb and mitigate the risk. Sustainability is no different. So as we go through this sort of challenge, what we need to do as a bank is to come up with propositions that navigate all three of those for all segments. So you can have huge clients, really complex organizations across the globe, like a Walmart or something like that, to middle market international ones who are expanding quickly, to smaller business banking clients. You have the whole range across geographies and across different sectors. You can have the hard to abate sectors, but you can have other sectors where the consumers, ultimate consumers, have a real power and influence over whether, you know, they think the goods are good enough for them. And you don't have to be a shareholder nowadays to sort of have a say on whether a company is a force for good or not, and you support them or not. So that's our role across the sustainability lens.
Okay, that's great. And then, you know, a key part of your role, as Paolo mentioned in the introduction, is the development, leading, and implementation of your frameworks and strategies that you put in place. So can you tell us a little bit more about the key pillars of HSBC's sustainability strategy, and what does that look like for you and your team?
Sure. So we're committed to net zero, and sustainability remains we've obviously changed leadership. Banks or companies do. We remain committed to really doing our bit on sustainability. And what I can do is I can obviously articulate the strategy for the last 3 years that we've run in the commercial bank. And then what I will have to say is that because I'm in this new role, merging two divisions together, bringing those teams together, it's only fair that we reflect on what we've learned and might, you know, peak and pivot that sort of tweak and pivot that strategy. But the three sort of levers that we had were in a Venn diagram, so 3 overlapping circles, go back to real fundamental basic school days. Mm-hmm. And the first one was we want to be the trusted transition partner for all our clients. So remember, over 1 million of these are corporate clients, over 1 million of them. And the second lever was that we wanted to tackle decarbonisation and sustainability at more of an ecosystem level. So we zoomed in on that trade business that I ran and the sustainable supply chain. So at a corporate level, at a supply chain level. And then the third circle in this Venn diagram was we wanted to be the sort of the go-to bank for the new economy. And that had 2 bookends to it. It had the climate tech startups. And these are critical enablers for the others to achieve their goals. And we can be kingmaker. We can help these climate tech startups navigate the sort of the valley of death and the sort of the drought in terms of financing at certain phases of development, and scale them up into the rest of our network. And at the other bookend, there was sustainable infrastructure. So I have to do this podcast from the office today. You guys look as though you might be at home. I'm not at home because there is no internet or phone signal at the moment because the infrastructure is not there. And I'm told by my provider that they're waiting for some parts in the supply chain issue. So sustainable infrastructure is really critical as well. And you've got what I'd call the nascent technologies, like a hydrogen, for example. But you've actually got some quite sophisticated, mature technologies now, like wind, solar, battery, and so on and so forth. So when you put those 3 things together, you can see that there's this huge multiplier effect and a real sort of what I would call a network effect as we use those enablers to help others, but actually helps serve the purpose of those enablers as well.
Very interesting. And maybe, Natalie, can I ask you to elaborate a little bit on this topic of innovation and technology? In your opinion, what role they play in driving sustainable transformation of business and, in addressing some of the big problems that we have in society?
So I think, like any industrial revolution, the phase of innovation is really exciting. I mean, it's very cool. It's difficult not to get too focused on it and absorbed by it. If we look, I think it was about 2 years ago, to get to net zero in a semi-orderly fashion required the technologies that had yet to be funded and reach a degree of maturity. It was about 55% of technologies didn't exist. 2 years later, it's 35%. And you think, oh, wow, this is making huge progress. We're on track. But probably it was actually the lower hanging fruit that was the easy ones to pick off. The next 35% of the technologies
It's going to be tough.
is definitely going to be tough. And I do think that to support that, banks and other interested parties are going to have to come together and think about novel ways of financing. And remember, I was talking about absorbing risk, but aligning risk to parties in ways that work for them. And the same goes for infrastructure as well. But it is exciting.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we connected a few months back in occasion of a meeting in Dubai with several HSBC's senior leaders. And I was actually quite, inspired by not only the work you are doing at HSBC, but something that truly got my attention was the focus on SMEs on one side. So not only big, large clients, but SMEs as well, and supply chains. And I guess that is, something I would like you to comment on. But also, as someone who has been developing several initiatives in the company, I'm wondering if there is one maybe you are particularly proud of that you wanted to share with our audience.
Absolutely. So if I just thread that through from the climate tech stuff, because I think some of the climate tech, and it comes into the propositions and helping those SMEs develop. If we look at the role of AI and data analytics as well, and if we look at the problems that some of our clients have. So we have the full spectrum. We have clients who have all the data that they need, very sophisticated. They know exactly what they want from us, and they're not shy in telling us. And then you have some of the other clients that are a little bit more we want to be on this journey. How can you help us? So they're looking for us for inspiration and insight. And then there are others which are, I've got no resource for this. I've got no data. I've got no know-how, and I'm about to be booted out of a supply chain. Or, as you witnessed during that training session, an example where a client had been booted out of a supply chain with no warning from the buyers and so on and so forth. So the technologies around that data and AI are pretty also useful in terms of the climate tech. But back to that course that we were doing, and the role that leaders play, and some of the initiatives that we've done to really support the SMEs. I mean, we've got about 12 of them. We came up with an HSBC sustainability tracker. We've come up with a carbon calculator. We did an RFP. We've got a partnership with Diginex. In fact, I had a wonderful opportunity to support them when they had their NASDAQ bell ringing. So they've recently IPO'd. We didn't do the IPO, but what they did was that they recognized the role that HSBC had played in terms of being a bit of a kingmaker and helping their business expand through the propositions that we had developed around their propositions. So it helped them grow. It helped our SMEs get the necessary data and so on that they need to collect to certify their ESG performance, and stay in these supply chains. So we've also got a partnership with EcoVadis, where actually the regulator had indicated to us that, and others, that there was an underserved part of the market, and they were quite concerned about it. because doing a traditional sustainable linked loan can get quite expensive, quite time consuming, and you're negotiating very specific KPIs in each instance, and therefore not really sort of standardized. So it's very difficult for these SMEs to comply with that. So we would have situations where clients really wanted to do it, but they really couldn't because the proposition didn't suit them. So we've now been able to come up with partners and come up with a very simple single KPI, which is their EcoVadis sort of score. And that means everybody knows what you're dealing with, is standardized, and they can improve that score on that journey to the sort of net zero and the transition. I mean, it goes beyond obviously just net zero climate, it's the full ESG. So a lot of these propositions really do serve a purpose. And again, coming back to the roles of banks and so on, you know, we can be a force for good here and serve this community in a way that moves everybody, even if it's just a little bit, it all counts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Natalie, just listening to some of the initiatives you've just discussed with us, and also your strategy, which, as you mentioned, has sort of those three kind of in your diagram, the three main pillars. There's obviously a lot of moving parts. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the critical skills that you need, you know, that are essential to to thrive in your role as a sustainability leader? And then on a personal level, how have you worked to develop those skills yourself?
Okay, so I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of choppy water at the moment, and we're in a sort of a real confluence of influences. So it feels like a storm on the top of the sea, and then there's some eddies as well. Some people can be quite tempted to sort of go off with an eddy in a different direction. But underneath that, there is a core current that is not changing. And so what we need to do is to make sure that people stay focused on the real long-term event, not get distracted with some temporary sort of challenges and issues, but equally recognize those temporary challenges and issues. So it's stay focused, make sure that everybody has the information that they need to make the right decisions. Very important to celebrate success, even little small bits of success. We have found that a very impactful tool internally with sort of awards and so on. Learn from setbacks. I mean, very quickly learn from setbacks because we have to be pretty agile in this one. Really important to sort of communications, absolutely key. You've got to stay connected. You've got to stay communicating. You can't just sort of ignore these eddies and storms around us. We need to take that data and new data to show what science is saying about where we are today and what the trajectory could be or should be, so that we can make sure everybody is informed about that and don't think that we're just sort of ignoring it because we were set on a course. So you have to pivot your course and adapt to it, but stay true to the force that's not going away. I mean, if you think about, we all know what the impacts are if we don't hit the sustainability agenda. They're absolutely horrific. But equally, we know it's not going in necessarily a smooth and orderly fashion. And therefore, we have to be pretty agile. And get some sort of balance sheet velocity in there enables us to be a bit more agile and not just deploy it once, but deploy it multiple times and so on. And then lead from a personal perspective. Melina, your sort of question was really, what am I doing about it in a personal capacity as well? I mean, I would like to think I'm doing sort of quite a lot. So in the bank, I'm the senior sponsor for our Sustainability Charity Challenge, which is to take 120, in fact, this year it's so popular, 240 people on a 100-kilometer trek for water aid. People do this in their own time, so they have to take holiday. It's self-funded, and we try and raise 200K for water aid charity. This time round, which will be at the end of April, beginning of May, will be in the Himalayas, the Indian Himalayas, and the project that's envisaged by WaterAid impacts 90,000 people in terms of giving them clean water. That's not trivial. And I literally walk the talk and talk the walk. So I will be talking all the way along this and converting. Mind you, they're already a bit of an echo chamber, I think, with the gang that goes on this one. And then in terms of just my personal life as well, EV car, and experimenting with those long distance drives, seeing how that infrastructure evolves over time, actually noticing there's quite a lot of hydrogen infrastructure now in Europe for heavy goods vehicles, which wasn't there before.
Yeah.
The solar panels, I have a little paddock, which I'm converting to an eco zone using GS4 grass seed. I have sheep, and the benefits there are huge and diverse. We have now got kingfishers back, we've got otters. My morning chorus is actually a hoot off between owls that weren't there 5 years ago. And 4:40 in the morning, you hear the first one just go boo, and then you think, where's the other one? It died. And then before you know it, it's a twit-to-boo, and this, that, and the other. So we've definitely got at least two types of sort of owls. The kingfishers are just magnificent. The otters freak you out when they're making the noise and you're not expecting it, but you can get used to it. And I've got some wonderful videos of that. And then the rest of the biodiversity, even the dragonflies just around, we've got a swampy pond. The dragonflies there are fantastic. So I'm all in, including all my pension funds with HSBC ESG. So I am very confident that there's some longer term value in that.
Absolutely.
Your personal finances in order, of course.
So I'm a living experiment. Experiment. Yeah.
It sounds like you're living in a biodiversity oasis, so it sounds lovely. You're
really trying, actually, and learning a lot from all walks of life. Vets can be very helpful in terms of recommending how to keep low parasite level down. But when you use the GS4 grass seed and you look at what it's doing to the soil and then all the sort of insect life. I'm a beekeeper. My husband is a third generation beekeeper. That's probably quite a core influence actually over the sort of literally generations. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess before, Natalie, you said sustainability is a journey, and I definitely support that. And every journey has got its ups and downs, and you probably agree this is a quite an interesting time. With Europe rethinking its approach to compliance with the recent omnibus package. What is happening in the States. Last week, I don't know if you saw on the Financial Times that there was an article that was challenging banks, if they truly believe or not on sustainability. So there is a lot happening, right? So I'm wondering, in this type of environment, how do you motivate, your teams, to stay focused and keep the direction of traveling? Is that possible?
Yeah, it is possible. And I think that the team is, and I'm obviously in the process of building a new team now, but I think the resilience qualities of the team that you've got to build because of the quite extraordinary challenges that you face, and I'm sure it's not just in banking actually, requires, truly exceptional people who are on the sort of, if not true pioneers, certainly on the fringe of being sort of pioneering. And I'm not sure that you can really do this for a true length of time unless you have a sort of a personal, real belief in it to give you that extra sort of resilience. So I will be sort of selecting the team quite carefully so that they've got the natural attributes to withstand the battering that can sometimes happen. But to be careful that we don't have, an extreme evangelist will get very frustrated and may be tempted to go off and do something in a hurry that might not be the coolest thing to do in a banking environment. So we need to get people on that sort of maturity curve in the solid support zone. We need to make sure that they have the sort of conviction around what we're doing. And that is up to me and my team to make sure that we equip them with that. And Paolo, you with your help. You're not getting away from this. Then not only the conviction, you can sit there quite quietly having the conviction, you've got to do something with it. So you've got to have the confidence to engage with your clients and have the right conversation. And then in an environment where, it might be tempting to just sort of take a step back for a little bit, until the sort of storm passes, to have the courage to lean into this and have the right conversations with the clients. The clients actually are, on the whole, I think the financial services industry or certain parts of it are a bit of a laggard, actually. So you frequently find the clients are very willing and hungry to know how it is that we can help them with those three things: financing, mitigating risk, and sort of facilitating their sort of journey. And we're at a nice pivotal point, actually, where, in Paolo, you know this very well, and Melina too, where it's no longer we're doing this because we need to tick a box and we need to do something to look as though we're doing something good. That's not it anymore. It really is, this is actually a competitive advantage. This is commercial. Yes, there's a lot of safe, sustainable, profitable growth, both for the bank and for our clients, in being a sort of a leader or a pretty speedy follower here.
I fully agree. This is probably the greatest shift we have seen in this decade in business. And Natalie, when you look at the future, and I guess some of the big challenges that we face as climate action, for example, are you generically speaking optimistic we are going to get there, and do you see really business playing an important role in us getting there?
So I would say I'm a realistic optimist. So I'm not a sort of a blind optimist who is sort of saying, right, it's this pathway and only this pathway, and then you suddenly find yourself outside the fringe of the art of the possible, because that's dissociated from what is really going to happen. So a realistic optimist, therefore you have to be pretty agile. I do think we will get there, because we have to get there. There's no question about that. And I do feel that certainly banking and businesses have a huge role to play, and that they are increasingly playing that role. Mm-hmm. I also think that the sort of any industrial sort of revolution, you can't just sort of have a major cutoff of one solution and you could, but it's pretty unjust in terms of some of the outcomes that would result from that. So I'm a big fan of a real just transition, in particular for emerging markets, in particular Asia. And I do see in that capacity, gas as a transition molecule is better than sort of the no transition, because we all fall out. So we've got to do this in a skillful way. We've got to recognize where a country has got a plan. It may not be perfect, but it's better than not doing it, and that we should be sort of facilitating that in a sort of a just and equitable way.
Yeah, this is, I guess, also what I learned, in my 20 years of sustainability, that you need to be pragmatic if you want to drive change.
But it doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all drill, baby, drill. That's what I'm talking about.
No, absolutely. And I'm conscious of time. So if you allow me, Natalie, I do have one final question for you. And is this one. What advice would you give to someone aspiring to become a senior leader in sustainability in banking or in any sector? And if you have got any suggestions for books or readings that could be a good source of knowledge and inspiration.
Okay, thank you, Paolo. One book that I feel did sort of resonate with me, and it goes back to that being sort of optimistic but pragmatic and keeping it real, is a book called Net Positive by Paolo and Winston. I feel that that's really tangible. I would really strongly recommend people sort of read that one, understand it, and apply it. It's quite a good roadmap. In terms of other advice, again, it's back to this being pragmatic and recognize that this is not a smooth or a linear journey, is avoid the echo chamber. It is very it's very easy, and especially with some of the sort of platforms that we all sort of use, to sort of just get into this echo chamber. So to avoid that and make sure you get sort of diverse sort of feeds into what really is sort of happening. Be pretty forensic in terms of what's really needed and when, because I think resources are really going to be quite finite. And I'm not talking about planet resources, I'm talking about the sort of human resources to do this. So we need to adhere to a principle, which is, I think, the way I describe it is no more than is necessary, no less than is sufficient. Because anything outside, really sweat that, because anything outside that is sort of a waste of time or energy, and we can't afford to do that. So challenge yourself. Is it in that sweet bucket for this moment in time to be driving the outcomes that we want? Anything else is a distraction.
Yeah.
And then I think it is, if everybody could, and it does sort of come from the Net Positive book, I think, if you can make every decision and put it through a sustainability filter, our jobs are done. So where anybody can influence that, even at a small scale, it can make quite a big difference. Every decision goes through a sustainability filter. And sustainability to me, by the way, is the SDGs, all of them. That's really key as well.
Fantastic. Natalie, it was truly a privilege to have you in our show. Thank you very much for your time, and really congratulations for the incredible work you are doing at HSBC.
Thank you very much, Paolo and Melinda.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.